Welcome back. So now to understand self, we need to also understand what is constructor in class and what is the responsible of constructor. So constructor is one method which is automatically called when you create object for any class. So right now we don't have any constructor here, right? Then you might be wondered that how constructor is being called when you don't define any constructor. So when you don't create any constructor, so here constructor is nothing but just like another method, that's it. There is no such difference. But when you create object for any classes, so here in the step number 9 we created object for this class, right? So when you create, automatically that constructor for that specific class should be called, and if you don't define anything, then default constructor will be called. Now let me show how default constructor looks like. Even if you don't create in your class, at runtime automatically that will be created and will be attached to this class. Let's see what is that. If you want to create a constructor, the syntax is little different. So start with def, which is common just like any other function or method. But for constructor, you have to give two underscores, 1, 2, and then init. Init is a keyword to declare constructors in Python. But whereas in other programming languages, to create constructor or declare constructor, we would create by the name of its class only. Class name is calculator, right? We define constructor name also calculator only. That's the rule in Java or JavaScript or C Sharp, okay, or C++ or C. But whereas in Python, constructor name is not class name. Constructor name should always be init, init. You see that it is already suggesting us. So simply select that method. Basically, it should have two underscores in the beginning, two underscores at the end. Between them, you have to write a keyword called init. And thereafter, this whole syntax is like similar to function creation only. The def keyword and the self should be automatically come. I'll come to that. And that colon. Alright? Nice. So hit and enter. And again code indentation. It should be exactly from that point. Right. So this is what it attaches if you don't declare any constructor. But if you declare constructor, then that method will be called first at the step number 11 automatically. Now let's see the demo. Print. Let me write I am called automatically when object is created. Right. So why there is an error? Come on, PyCharm, don't irritate us with this all blank line stuff. Okay. Now when you run this, actually you are not calling this anywhere, right? But just because you create object, this constructor will be called. Let's see. Control Shift F10 to run. And you see that I am called automatically when object is created. Yes, at step number 12, this method got executed. And next, step number 13, get data method is called. So I am now executing as method in class is printed. And the last 100. So now you understood how to call methods, variables and constructors automatically from class. And you need to call them outside of the class by creating object of them. Next. So there are two type of variables which you need to know. One is class variable and another is instance variables. These are the two different variables available in general programming languages. So whatever variable you define immediately inside your class are nothing but class variables. These are class variables. And the variables which you define inside constructor are called instance variables. Okay. So class variables will be constant no matter how many objects you create. Okay. Right now you created one object. You can also create another object as well. Now for example, obj1. You can create a number of objects for your class. And instance variables differs for each and every object. But whereas class variables are constant no matter how many objects you create. Now let's try to first understand instance variables and then come to the self keyword. Okay, so basically if I want to send parameters from my object to this class, how would I send it? So let me create a new function again, new method, subtraction or multiplication. We will use the same addition what we have used. Okay, um, so to create method, how do you create that? So right now you are here, right? If you want to create method, if you do enter, you will be inside the method. So do one backspace so that you will be inside class. All the methods you see that declared very straight, and give some come down, because again if you give one space it would be good. If not, the stupid PyCharm will complain that it won't give you error when it runs, but it gives some weird line which we don't like. Summation, just something like that. Self variable parameter is mandatory all the time when you declare method inside the class. You need to know some things before I talk about that. That's why I'm delaying teaching that. Right. So basically it has to sum two numbers. So this can provide only logic of how to sum two integers, but the value should come from runtime from the object creation. Okay. So let's say calculator 2 comma 3. When you call this class, let's send two arguments to sum. This 2 comma 3 will reach this constructor first. When you call this, 2 comma 3 will reach here. So right now you are telling that when you create class object, you are not sending any parameters. Okay, so self is a negligible one. Even if there is a self keyword here, that's negligible one. But right now you are sending two more parameters, right? So you have to make sure that those two parameters are cached here in your constructor. If not, it will throw an error. So a comma b. Like this you have to catch. Then only this syntax is valid. Okay. So how many arguments you are sending in your class? That many arguments should also be in your constructor declaration. If there is a mismatch, then it will throw an error. So here there are two, and here also there are two. As I said, ignore self. Self is default added in Python, so that will not consider it. Okay. So once constructor catches the 2 comma 3, now store that 2 comma 3 into your class instance variables. Now here comes the meaning of self, right? So here a, b, these are instance variables. Self is nothing but object. Obj, we have declared object, right? This, when you create object, this object will be passed as a first argument, and we call that as a self in Python standards. So for that object you are attaching two variables a, b, or you can say first number, second number. You have created two more variables inside your class, just like num. These are two more new variables. But understand that these two variables are instance variables, not class variables. For these two variables, you are loading the values from here, 2, 3. So 2, 3 will fall here, right? 2 is now carefully stored in the first number, 3 is stored in the second number. Now, in your summation function, you have to return a plus b, right? So self dot first number is 2 because we just stored, plus self dot second number. You are basically summing up two values and then you are sending back. That's it. So here, why we are calling them as instance variables? Because if you create another object called 4 comma 5, oh, here we already have, right? Let's create 4 comma 5. let me remove this. Too many blank lines. It's not liking so many blank lines. Okay, perfect. So next time you are creating one more object 4 comma 5. Now when 4 comma 5 falls here, 4 we are sending to first number, 5 we are sending to second number. See, for the next object these variables values are changed. Earlier they were 2 comma 3 and now they are 4 comma 5. So these instance variables keep on changing for every object creation, but whereas this class variable does not change, it's not impacted with object creation. So that's the difference between those two. Okay, now when I say self dot, people have a query that why do we need to use self dot. You already said that this is another variable in your class, right? Why can't I use like this? In Python, you can never call variable simply with its name. You have to always attach with the self dot. Here self is nothing but object reference of who is calling you. Okay, calculator 2 comma 3, when you create object, obj will be passed first to your constructor and obj will take all these values into its memory. So if you want to call any variable inside your methods, you have to always call that variable with the self dot only. That means object dot first number, object dot second number. But whereas in other programming languages, when you declare variables on the top, you will directly use them here, right? But you can't do that in Python. Now let's say 2 plus 3 is 5 is what we are sending, and now I want to concatenate, I want to sum up with my class variable as well. Can I use like this? Because we just realized that this is independent of object, so people think that you can use like this. No, you can't. As I said, you can never call any variable with its name. As it is class variable, you can either call class dot num because it's a class variable, right? So sorry, when you say class name, you can call it as calculator dot num, which is valid. As it is class variable, calculator dot num you can say, and you can also say self, because for that specific object instance it will also read class variable in itself. When you create object, it will come here and it will read all the instance variables and class variables and keep it in itself. So self is like global and universal to call any variable. Okay, but for class variables you have provision. As it is class variable, you can use calculator.num as well, but here you can't use, because as it is not class variables, it is mandatory to use self only. But whereas with class variables, it's optional for you. You can use either self dot or class name dot. But please do remember that you just cannot call with variable name. I know this is little confused for you if you are aware of another programming languages where you create variables and you call it inside your methods. But in Python, it should always be referenced with this. Alright. So what we did here. So we created parameterized constructor by passing numbers from your object creation, and 2 comma 3 you are sending here. These values are loaded in the class instance variables, and you are summing up those instance variables in your function or method called summation, plus you are also summing up with class variables. So output here, if I call summation for first object is 100 plus 2 plus 3. 105 should be the output for first object, and for second object output should be 109. Okay, so instead of obj dot get data, or let's do one thing, it's written here, right? So I would put summation okay, so it returns and prints the output here. Let's see how it goes. Perfect. Test ran, and you see that 105 for first object, 109 for second object. Okay. So let's summarize like what all new we have learnt as part of this class, because that's more important when you come from another programming languages, just to avoid confusion. Alright, so self keyword is mandatory for calling variable names into method. This is the one. And instance and class variables have whole different purpose. One is attached to the object and one is not attached to the object. Alright, and constructor name should be init. This should be the constructor name. And what else new we have learnt as part of this? Everything else is same, right? And you can just say that new keyword is not required when you create object. So basically I am assuming that you already have some other programming language basic, and I am showing how different Python is here. Okay, or if you are not aware of any programming language and if Python is the first, then just don't worry about this. Just assume that this is how object is created. Why do you need to worry about new keyword is not required when you don't know other programming language? Alright guys, these are the 4 points which you can remember from this class. So in this lecture we have understood how to create classes, variables, methods, and how to create objects, and how to create constructors, how to create parameterized constructors, and how to call methods from the objects. In the next lecture, let's understand about inheritance in Python. Okay, thank you.